and it's continually done, and with the goal of pleasing Guru and Krishna. So, realizing the power of pure devotional service is the goal of the Vedic knowledge. It is our eternal position as devotees of the Lord to always be rendering service to the Lord. And the pure devotees have nothing to derive as personal profit from their unalloyed service to the Lord. They render incessant service to the Lord spontaneously without any reservation. Everyone within the creation of the Lord is rendering service to the Lord indirectly or directly. No one is an exception to this law of the Lord. So, rendering service indirectly. Examples of that would be one is obliged, like for example, sometimes people fast on Ekadasi, right? They don't know anything about Ekadasi, but they fast. So certain things are indirect service to the Lord because of the absolute nature of the Lord. So fasting on Ekadasi is beneficial spiritually. Even if the reason why one is fasting is because they just thought, oh, today I'm going to fast, you know. But if that day is an Ekadasi, it's very beneficial for them. And also, when it says everyone's serving the Lord indirectly, whatever you do in this life, Krishna is the ultimate beneficiary of all service. So, whatever good thing people do, or even whatever bad thing they do, the Lord is the ultimate beneficiary. So everyone within the creation of the Lord is rendering service to the Lord indirectly or directly. No one is an exception to this law of the Lord. Those who are rendering service indirectly, being forced by the illusory agent of the Lord, are rendering service unto him unfavorably. But those who are rendering service unto him directly, under the direction of his beloved agent, meaning the spiritual master, are rendering service unto him favorably. Such favorable servitors are devotees of the Lord, and by the grace of the Lord they can enter into the mysterious region of transcendence by the mercy of the Lord. But the mental speculators remain in darkness all the time. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord himself guides the pure devotees toward the path of realization due to their constant engagement in the loving service of the Lord in spontaneous affection. That is the secret of entering into the kingdom of God. Fruitive activities and speculation are no qualifications for entering. So one time, one person called me up, and they had read something on my webpage, and they had some questions to ask me. And then this person said, oh, I'm very interested in spiritual life. In fact, I want to be a spiritual teacher. I said, well, the way to become a spiritual teacher is to start out by being a spiritual teacher's student. And she said, no, I don't agree with that. I want to discover it on my own. I said, but that's not the process that's recommended by God himself, by Krishna himself. Oh, I don't believe in Krishna. I said, okay, but Jesus is a teacher. They call him rabbi, and his disciples studied under him. He said, no. I want to discover it all on my own. I said, but that's not the process. Either in Christianity or in Krishna consciousness or in Islam also, you have to have a teacher. He said, no, I don't believe in that. Well, see, that's modern disease, right? Everybody wants to be guru without accepting guru. And they want to just speculate on their own to establish the truth. But what they establish is a hodgepodge of nonsense. And they remain in nonsense the rest of their life. Okay, so fruitive activities and speculation are no qualification for entering into the spiritual world. Only by making such inquiries, now this is the verse 39 where we're starting from today, only by making such inquiries in this world can one be successful and perfectly cognizant, for such inquiries invoke transcendental ecstatic love unto the personality of Godhead, who is the proprietor of all the universes, and guarantee 100% immunity from the dreadful repetition of birth and death. So, what does he mean here by inquiries? Well, one should know who is God, what is the position of living entities, what is time, what is the material nature, and what is one's real eternal duty as a spirit soul. And the way to know is to be trained in devotional service by bona fide teachers. Now Prabhupada explains, the inquiries of the sages headed by Sonaka are herewith praised by Sutta Goswami on the merit of their transcendental nature. As already concluded, only the devotees of the Lord can know him to a considerable extent, and no one else can know him at all. So the devotees are perfectly cognizant of all spiritual knowledge. The personality of Godhead is the last word in the absolute truth. Impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma, Supersoul, are included in the knowledge of the personality of Godhead. So one who knows the personality of Godhead can automatically know all about him, his multipotencies, and his expansions. So the devotees are congratulated as being all successful. A 100% devotee of the Lord is immune to the dreadful material miseries of repeated birth and death. So a devotee is a person who has sincere and pertinent questions. And ultimately, the questions are about how can I surrender to the Lord, how can I improve my service, and how can I please the Lord. So these are the type of important questions that one can ask. How can I please my Guru and Gurus and Krishna? Because if you please the Lord, then he will do everything in his power, and his power is absolute, to help the devotee attain success in going back to Godhead. So, only by making such inquiries in this world can one be successful. So if we want to be successful, we should ask pertinent questions. Now, how do we ask a pertinent question? We should see within ourselves that, well, if we listen carefully to class, we always will have a question. There will always be something that we don't quite understand, or we need to have some clarification about it. Okay. So here we see that the sages, headed by Sonaka Rishi, were in Naimisharanya. They were asking important questions, and this pleased the Sonaka Rishi, and also such important questions, when they're asked and then answers are given, it invokes transcendental ecstatic love for the personality of Godhead. The worst thing that can happen is everyone remains silent. That means they were not really listening. Because if you listen carefully, there always will be some point that needs clarification or more information, because it piqued, P-I-Q-U-E, piqued the interest of the devotee. So, therefore, it says here, so the devotees are congratulated as being all successful. A 100% devotee of the Lord is immune to the dreadful material miseries of repeated birth and death. So becoming immune to the miseries of repeated birth and death, that is a very special thing. This immunity comes from understanding very, very, let's say, profoundly, that nothing can really make the soul suffer. The only thing it suffers is the gross and subtle body. Because these things are, the gross body and subtle body, are material and therefore not eternal. And this is the world of suffering. We're living in the world of suffering. So therefore, what suffers is the gross or the subtle body due to the false ego. If we purify the ego, if we develop strong sense of dedication to serving Krishna, then we can tolerate anything, knowing very well that everything is temporary in the material world, and that this body is only a temporary covering, and the subtle body is also a temporary covering of the soul. And so if we just identify ourselves as the soul, the witness of all the different changes that are taking place in this body, in this world, then we're not going to be affected by the different miseries of life. How do we tolerate it? By continuing service. Say, if you, just like if someone, like for example, someone plays video games. Sometimes they play video games for 48 or 64 hours straight. They don't eat, they don't sleep. They're just playing the game. Huh? It's austerity, yeah, it's big austerity. Why are they doing that? Well, it's related to the false ego. They want to win. They want to dominate. They want to be the best. Or they feel comfortable in that virtual world, more comfortable than the real world. So they want to be completely in that virtual world. So in that virtual world, the least competent person can become most competent. Like for example, not everyone can play in the National Basketball League or whatever it is. But you can get a game, a basketball game, and play, next to people that are supposed to be 8 feet tall or 100 feet tall. You can make them as tall as you want with your program, and you can make yourself as tall as you want with your program. You can beat them, right? In the virtual world of the internet or the computer. So some people feel more comfortable in that illusory world than we're already in an illusory world, but they go another step. They take illusion to another step, a higher step, and they're playing video games all the time. And okay, Prabhu, you played video games. What was going on in your mind? Right. Yes. So you felt more comfortable in that virtual world than the real world. Yeah, that's the whole point. Yeah. So there's no limit to the degrees of illusion. And in that illusory world that we put ourselves in, we suffer, and we find, and we're looking for ways of escaping that suffering. So unless we understand it's only by devotional service that all these illusions and problems of life can go away, there's no other way. And basically, that's what's being said here. There is no other way to get out of this illusion and suffering. Okay, so then we'll go on to verse 40. Now, from this point on, from 40 to the end to 44, it's glorification of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And first of all, we realize that the solution to all problems in life is engaging in devotional service with the guidance of bona fide gurus and without speculation, without material motives and desires, simply the desire to please Guru and Krishna. Right? And that will solve the problem of suffering. That will solve the problem of confusion and frustration and so forth. By the way, many studies are being made now showing that people who believe in God are much happier than people who don't. I don't know if you've seen those headlines. No? Oh, well, let's see if we can pull one up here. Huh? Religious people are happier than non-religious. Let's see what it says. Are religious people happier than non-religious people? Okay. They have a picture of two Indian ladies. You see? Can you see that? They're holding these little baskets on their head, and they're smiling. So they're supposed to be the religious people. Are religious people happier than non-religious? What makes people happy? This question can be difficult to answer. Happiness has been discussed throughout history. Philosophers, thinkers, and activists such as Aristippus, Aristotle, Zhuangzi, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Jeremy Bentham, and Bertrand Russell have considered happiness and life satisfaction to be one of the highest goals of human motivation. But happiness and life satisfaction can be tricky to define. While both make up part of a person's well-being, happiness refers to an individual's emotions, feelings, or moods. Life satisfaction, on the other hand, is more to do with the way people might think about their life as a whole, including their relationships. Previous research suggests the happy person is young, healthy, well-educated, well-paid, optimistic, and extroverted. The same research found the happiest people tend to be religious, married, with high self-esteem and job morale and modest aspirations. It seems your gender and level of intelligence don't necessarily come into it. Okay, so there's one study that says religious people are found to be the happiest people. They tend to be religious, married, with high self-esteem and job morale and modest aspirations. So you have high self-esteem, high job morale, but modest aspirations. That means their desire for sense gratification is, let's say, adjusted to a certain limit, right, that they don't want to go beyond. So that means that they have some control over the desire for sense gratification. That makes them happier. Imagine if you have complete control, right? And the gender and level of intelligence don't necessarily come into it. Research suggests that around the world, over 84% of people belong to or are connected to a religious group. And our recent research looks at whether different religions experience different levels of happiness and life satisfaction. The findings show that individual religiosity and their country's level of development both affect people's happiness and life satisfaction. Well, see, the picture of happy religious people are two Indian ladies, right? So obviously, why did they choose them? They could have chosen anything. They could have chosen, two Aborigines in South Africa or South America. They chose two Indian ladies dressed in traditional saris that are smiling and carrying baskets on their heads, right? So it's very interesting why they chose that picture. So happiness research. Our study looks at a large number of different religious groups across 100 countries from 1981 to 2014 using data from the World Value Survey. Our findings suggest that Protestants, Buddhists, and Roman Catholics are happier and more satisfied with their lives compared with other groups, Jews, Hindus, Muslims, and the non-religious were in between, while Orthodox Christians were found to have the lowest happiness and life satisfaction rates. Okay. So the happiest, they found that Protestants, Buddhists, and Roman Catholics are happier and more satisfied with their lives compared with Jews, Hindus, Muslims. Well, they didn't count Vaishnavas. So it'd be interesting to see where the Vaishnavas come in there. Okay. In our research, we found that many factors were positively associated with happiness and life satisfaction. These included being Protestant, female, married, and younger, 16 to 24 years old. The household's financial situation also came into it, as did a person's state of health and freedom of choice. We discovered that national pride and trust were important in terms of happiness rankings, as was having friends, family, and leisure time. Attending weekly religious practice was also discovered to be an important factor. On the other hand, being unemployed and on a low income was negatively associated with happiness and life satisfaction. A closer look at the magnitude of the association between these factors and happiness and life satisfaction revealed that health, financial stability, and freedom of choice or control over one's life were the most important factors, but more research needs to be done to understand why some religious groups are happier and more satisfied than others. Okay, so you see, there are studies being made, and it usually turns out that religious people are happier than the non-religious people. Okay. So now the next verse says, Uttama Sloka Charitan Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nisheya Saya Lokasya Danyam Swasti Ayanam Mahat. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of God, and it is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. This is an extremely important verse, 1st Canto, 3rd chapter, 40th verse. It clearly says that Srimad Bhagavatam is the incarnation of Krishna, especially in this age of Kali. It's the literary incarnation of Krishna. And it's compiled by Sri Vyasadeva, who is also an empowered incarnation of the Lord. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu declared that Srimad Bhagavatam is the spotless, sound representation of all Vedic knowledge and history. That's why it's called Amala Purana. It has no spots or nothing tarnishing it. There are selected histories of great devotees who are in direct contact with the personality of Godhead. Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of Lord Sri Krishna and is therefore non-different from him. Srimad Bhagavatam should be worshipped as respectfully as we worship the Lord. Thereby, we can derive the ultimate blessings of the Lord through its careful and patient study. As God is all light, all bliss, and all perfection, so also is Srimad Bhagavatam. We can have all the transcendental light of the Supreme Brahman, Shri Krishna, from the recitation of the Srimad Bhagavatam, provided it is received through the medium of the transparent spiritual master. Lord Chaitanya's private secretary, Srila Swarupa Damodar Goswami, advised all intending visitors who came to see the Lord at Puri to make a study of the Bhagavatam from the Person Bhagavatam. Person Bhagavatam is the self-realized bona fide spiritual master, and through him only can one understand the lessons of Bhagavatam in order to receive the desired result. One can derive from the study of the Bhagavatam all benefits that are possible to be derived from the personal presence of the Lord. It carries with it all the transcendental blessings of Lord Shri Krishna that we can expect from his personal contact. So because basically he's saying this transcendental literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, is non-different than Krishna. And you can derive all the transcendental blessings of Lord Shri Krishna that we would expect to get from him by personal contact. Those very interesting statements by Prabhupada. Therefore, you can say there's no other book in the whole history of the world like this Bhagavatam. And we're very lucky to have it. This is why Prabhupada translated Bhagavatam, spent so much time on it. He wanted to give this most precious gift to the devotees in his time and in the future. Okay, so a literary incarnation of God. That means that although the Bhagavatam is made of paper and ink and glue and cardboard, it is like a deity that is transformed into something spiritual by virtue of the transcendental messages. And if there's any way that God can speak to us, it is through Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Even though we don't see Krishna physically, of course we see his deity physically, it's not different than Krishna. And here, all the philosophy that Krishna explained to Arjuna is explained first in Bhagavad Gita, and then it's expanded in the Srimad Bhagavatam, expanded tremendously. So if you want to learn all the fine points in Bhagavad Gita, you must read Srimad Bhagavatam also. There are many verses that are connected. So text 41. Shri Vyasadeva delivered it to his son, Sukadeva Goswami, who is the most respected among the self-realized, after extracting the cream of all Vedic literatures and histories of the universe. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. So, what did Sukadeva Goswami do? He extracted the cream of all Vedic literatures and histories of the universe. So, in other words, he studied the four original Vedas, he studied the Puranas and the Upanishads that were included in the four original Vedas, and then the Puranas, ancient histories, 18 Puranas, and then the Mahabharata, and then the Vedanta Sutra. Then he expanded whatever his father taught him about Bhagavatam and extracted from all these other previous books the cream of the teachings in these other books, and especially those parts that directly spoke about Krishna, and put it in this concentrated form of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So you don't have to read any other book. There are so many Vedas, you don't have to read them. You read Bhagavatam, you have them all. in a very compact and intensive way. Okay, text 41. Purport. Men with a poor fund of knowledge only accept the history of the world from the time of Buddha, or since 600 before Christ. And prior to this period, all histories mentioned in the scriptures are calculated by them to be only imaginary stories. That is not a fact. All the stories mentioned in Puranas and Mahabharata, etc., are actual histories, not only of this planet, but also of millions of other planets within the universe. Sometimes the history of planets beyond this world appears to such men to be unbelievable, but they do not know the different planets, but they do not know that different planets are not equal in all respects, and that therefore some of the historical facts derived from other planets do not correspond with the experience of this planet. Considering the different situation of different planets and also time and circumstances, there is nothing wonderful in the stories of the Puranas, nor are they imaginary. We should always remember the maxim. Maxim means some type of fundamental truth, something that is great wisdom, that one man's food is another man's poison. We should not, therefore, reject the stories and histories of the Puranas as imaginary. The great rishis, like Vyasa, had no business putting some imaginary stories in their literatures. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, historical facts selected from the histories of different planets have been depicted. It is therefore accepted by all the spiritual authorities as the Mahapurana. The special significance of these histories is that they are all connected with the activities of Lord Krishna in a different time and atmosphere. Srila Sukadeva Goswami is the topmost personality of all the self-realized souls, and he accepted this as the subject of studies from his father, Vyasadeva. Srila Vyasadeva is the great authority, and the subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam being so important, he delivered the message first to his great son, Sri Sukadeva Goswami. It is compared to the cream of the milk. Vedic literature is like the milk ocean of knowledge. Cream or butter is the most palatable essence of milk, and so also is Srimad Bhagavatam, for it contains all palatable, instructive, and authentic versions of different activities of the Lord and his devotees. Like, for example, when many of our cows were pregnant and they were going through the last 2 or 3 months before giving birth, we stopped milking them so that they would have the strength to, be able to give birth and nurture their calves. And at that time, we started taking milk from another dairy that has the same cows. But after a little while, people didn't like that milk. Is that right? Yeah. You know why? Because it didn't have the full cream in it. And what did we just read? Cream or butter is the most palatable essence of milk. So every one of our bottles, is at least 2 inches or 3 inches of pure cream, right? Because this breed of cow, the Guernsey cow, gives very rich milk. Right? So here, this Bhagavatam is compared to the most palatable essence of milk. In other words, it's full cream milk. For it contains all palatable, instructive, and authentic versions of different activities of the Lord and his devotees. Yeah, so you have history of Lord Ramachandra, history of Shiva and Parvati, history of Kashyapa Muni and Devhuti, and you have history of Krishna's appearance, and you have all these, and the history of Narada Muni, history of Prahlad Maharaj, history of Dhruva Maharaj. You have all these histories, and they're all full of nectar, and they're very pleasing to hear, and they're very instructive. So here it says the Bhagavatam contains all palatable, instructive, and authentic versions of different activities of the Lord and his devotees. There is no gain, however, in accepting the message of Bhagavatam from the unbelievers, atheists, and professional reciters who make a trade of Bhagavatam for the laymen. It was delivered to Sri Sukadeva Goswami, and he had nothing to do with the Bhagavata business. He did not have to maintain family expenses by such trade. Srimad Bhagavatam should therefore be received from the representative of Sukadeva, who must be in the renounced order of life without family encumbrance. Milk is undoubtedly very good and nourishing, but when it is touched by the mouth of a snake, it is no longer nourishing. Rather, it becomes a source of death. Similarly, those who are not strictly in the Vaishnava discipline should not make a business of this Bhagavatam and become a cause of spiritual death for so many hearers. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that the purpose of all the Vedas is to know Him, Lord Krishna, and Srimad Bhagavatam is Lord Shri Krishna himself in the form of recorded knowledge. Therefore, it is the cream of all the Vedas, and it contains all historical facts of all times in relation with Shri Krishna. It is factually the essence of all histories. So this is a beautiful purport, and it's glorifying Srimad Bhagavatam. And you can understand why Prabhupada translated the Bhagavatam. He started with Bhagavad Gita, and then the Bhagavatam, and then Chaitanya Charitamrita. These are the best scriptures in the whole universe. Sukadeva Goswami, so text 42. Sukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, in his turn, delivered the Bhagavatam to the great Emperor Parikshit, who sat surrounded by sages on the bank of the Ganges, awaiting death without taking food or drink. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. So this is the way to die. Some people are forced to starve themselves to death. Most deaths are caused by starvation. If you get sick, eventually you lose the desire to eat and you starve to death. However, here we see that Maharaj Parikshit voluntarily fasted to death. He wasn't forced to by being so sick and lost his appetite. He gained the appetite for hearing Bhagavatam and lost the appetite for eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. All transcendental messages are received properly in the chain of disciplic succession. This disciplic succession is called parampara. Unless, therefore, Bhagavatam or any other Vedic literatures are received through the parampara system, the reception of knowledge is not bona fide. So here, Prabhupada just finished saying that one should not hear Bhagavatam from professional reciters or from non-devotees or speculators and so forth. So, and now again he's saying that Bhagavatam or any other Vedic literatures are received through the parampara system. The reception of knowledge is not bona fide unless it comes through the parampara. Vyasadeva delivered the message to Sukadeva Goswami, and from Sukadeva Goswami, Suta Goswami received the message. One should therefore receive the message of Bhagavatam from Suta Goswami from his representative and not from any irrelevant interpreter. Yeah, I once met this Indian gentleman. He was living in Bellevue. He was a guru. He had disciples. And he was teaching them Bhagavad Gita. So he came to the temple and I met him. And then he found out that I was giving lectures on Bhagavad Gita. So then he said, I'm going to call you up and invite you to come and speak Bhagavad Gita to my students, my disciples. I said, okay, fine. So he called me up, and we got to talking about Bhagavad Gita. He's a teacher of Bhagavad Gita. So at one point, we got on the subject of Gandhi, who wrote a commentary on Bhagavad Gita. And I simply repeated what Prabhupada said about Gandhi. I said, Gandhi, in an amazing way, misinterpreted Bhagavad Gita in his commentary. I think he only translated some few chapters. And basically, he tried to forward his agenda of nonviolence through the Bhagavad Gita. And what he wrote was basically that Bhagavad Gita is in support of nonviolence. So I said to this gentleman, I said, how is this possible? I mean, Krishna convinces Arjuna to fight. And how did he? Yeah, and they fought, and the 640 million people were killed in the Battle of Kurukshetra. How can he skew or screw out of Bhagavad Gita that it's all about nonviolence? So the man got really upset that I said this, and then he very quickly excused himself and hung up. And of course, he didn't invite me to come and speak Bhagavad Gita to us. And I was thinking, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But then I said, no, I have to say that. I'm not going to, make a false narrative about Gandhi. What he did, especially when Prabhupada, I've read where he's using Gandhi as an example of a speculator, right? He gives his own interpretation of Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada says, why choose Bhagavad Gita? He said, just write your own Bhagavad Gita. But why you want to piggyback on the Bhagavad Gita, right? You can just write your own Bhagavad Gita by so-and-so, So anyway, I forgot about it, and some years went by. And I had met him and his wife. He was an older Indian gentleman, maybe in his late 70s, but he had a young American wife. She was like 30 years old. No, but I only met them once. So then, some years later, we were doing a festival at the Seattle waterfront. And we had set up our kitchen. This is the early days. We set up a full kitchen on the waterfront. And we had a 2-day festival. And I was cooking. We cooked there because to get around all the health rules, we just cooked right there. We set up a legal kitchen right on the board, the Alaskan Way in a park. On the water, basically, and we were cooking, and we cooked everything right there, and we were serving. So I didn't have time to do anything else except cook at that time. So and we were cooking, and people were just it's a public place, so people were walking by and watching us, and they're a little bit amazed. You have a whole kitchen set up, right? And we had these big pots, and we're making halva, and we're making matar paneer and rice, and quickly serving it to the people. So at one point I felt very funny, as if someone was looking at me, So I had a feeling maybe I should see if there is someone. So I turned around, I looked, and there was a woman who had a trench coat on and a big hat and was covering most of her face. And when I looked, she put her head down, and I couldn't see who she was. But I knew that she was looking at me, So anyway, it just it just confirmed that I felt I felt a little funny that someone was observing me. But then I said, I just shrugged it off. I went back to stirring my sweet rice, and then I felt that this person's coming closer, and I didn't want to look at him, so I just kept doing that. And all of a sudden, this voice comes from behind me and said, Harivilas. And I was like a little bit shocked. And I turned around, and it was the wife of the guru, the American wife of the guru. I said, oh, hello. I said, I haven't seen you for a long time. And she said, yeah, I know. I wanted to tell you, but my husband died. And then she had some tears, I said, oh, I'm very sorry to hear that. She said, yes, and it was a horrible death. I said, really? She said, yeah. He got very, very sick, and he became like an invalid, and he started to curse Krishna. I said, really? I said, I thought he was an expert on Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, I know, she said. This was so shocking. He started saying really mean things about Krishna and Bhagavad Gita, and he became very, very somber and negative. And eventually his sister came from India and took him away from me. And she started crying, right? And I said, well, I'm sorry, and this happened to you, Yeah, they wouldn't let me take care of him anymore. They took him back to India and he died. So that was it. And then she left, right? And I've never seen her since. So I was thinking about this. I said, this man, he was a guru. He had disciples, and he was teaching Bhagavad Gita, right, all the time for years, right? And in the end, he's cursing Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita. This is called Mayavad philosophy. You see, he actually didn't believe in Krishna. He was just doing it for a living. And whatever he was teaching was false, right? And then, because he got physically very sick and he was dying, he started cursing Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita. See, this is what we're up against. There are so many imposters like this in India, and they're claiming to know Bhagavad Gita. They don't actually teach Bhagavad Gita. They teach their own version of it, just like Gandhi. And they mislead people. And in the end, they don't even believe in God. You see, this is the tragedy of not being in a bona fide spiritual lineage or a bona fide parampara. This man was not in a bona fide parampara. And most of the teachers today are not in bona fide. I mean, you can eliminate all the people who worship Shiva, Ganapati, Mata, because none of those lineages are bona fide. There's only 4 bona fide sampradayas. As we said, the Rudra Sampradaya, the Kumar Sampradaya, the Lakshmi Sampradaya or Sri Sampradaya, and the Gaudiya, Brahma Gaudiya Madhva Sampradaya. That's it. The other sampradayas are not bona fide. Why? Because they don't accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's only these 4 sampradayas that accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And they mimic whatever Vaishnavas are doing. They have gurus, and they even teach Bhagavad Gita. Usually they stay away from Srimad Bhagavatam because it's all about Krishna, right? Bhagavad Gita they like because the Krishna in Bhagavad Gita is a philosophized Krishna. It's not real Krishna, and they have their own interpretation of it. Okay, so therefore, Emperor Parikshit received the information of his death in time, and he at once left his kingdom and family and sat down on the bank of the Ganges to fast till death. This is the way people die. Either they're forced by sickness to fast to death, or they voluntarily fast to death. Like Prabhupada voluntarily fasted to death. You know. At a certain point, he told Bhakti Churu, "Don't cook for me anymore." This was months before he left his body. And he hardly ate anything for about 4 or 5 months. All great sages, rishis, philosophers, mystics, etc., went there due to his imperial position. They offered many suggestions about his immediate duty, and at last it was settled that he would hear from Sukadeva Goswami about Lord Krishna. Thus the Bhagavatam was spoken to him. So here we see that the best thing we can do in this life, especially when we're approaching death, is to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, spoken by bona fide devotees. Sripad Sankaracharya, but actually, we should consider that we're going to die tomorrow. It could very well happen, right? I mean, Kim Jong-un, so a missile, atomic missile, will go from North Korea to Seattle, and miss Seattle and land in Sammamish, and blow us all up. It could happen, you know. But if we're hearing Bhagavatam when the explosion takes place, you know, just like one time someone was telling me they went to Badrinath. So on the way, you have to go up that narrow road on the mountain, and there's so many buses, and there's animals, and there's cars and buses coming one way, and there's buses and cars going the other way, and sometimes it's very, very narrow. You know, it's like almost a one-lane road, and you're way up, you know, like 15,000 feet up in the air in the mountain, and it's a very steep fall. So one bus slipped, and as it was falling down into the ravine, you know, 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet, all the people on the bus said, "Jai Ganga Mata Ki Jai." Only in India. Only in India. They weren't screaming. They were screaming, "Jai Ganga Mata," because they were falling down into the Ganga. So you see, we never know when we're going to die. It can happen at any time. But if we're always listening to Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, we're ready to go at any time. Therefore, we should not listen to anything else. We should not waste even 1 second listening to anything else. We just strictly hear this transcendental message. So, it was suggested to Maharaj Parikshit that he listen to Bhagavatam spoken by Sukadeva Goswami. Sripad Sankaracharya, who preached Mayavad philosophy and stressed the impersonal feature of the Absolute, also recommended that one must take shelter at the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna, for there is no hope of gain from debating. Indirectly, Sripad Sankaracharya admitted that what he had preached in the flowery grammatical interpretations of the Vedanta Sutra cannot help one at the time of death. At the critical hour of death, one must recite the name Govinda. This is the recommendation of all great transcendentalists. Sukadeva Goswami had long ago stated the same truth, that at the end one must remember Narayana. That is the essence of all spiritual activities. In pursuance of this eternal truth, Srimad Bhagavatam was heard by Emperor Parikshit, and it was recited by the able Sukadeva Goswami, and both the speaker and the receiver of the messages of Bhagavatam were duly delivered by the same medium. So one is doing Shravanam, and the other is doing Kirtanam. So Parikshit is hearing, and Sukadeva Goswami is speaking, or chanting Srimad Bhagavatam. They both attain perfection. So this is the decision we have to make. We only have so much time in our life. If we try and use every spare minute to hear Hare Krishna, Shri Gaurnitai ki jai, Shri Radhanila Madhava ki jai, Jagannath Subhadra Balaji ki jai, Lakshmi Nrsimhadev ki jai, Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai. if we use every spare minute that we have to hear and relish the message of Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, then we are actually using our body, our senses, our mind, and intelligence correctly. Okay, so text 43. Krishne swadhamupagate dharma jnanadi bihi saha kalo nasta drisam esa puranarko adunoditaha. This Bhagavata Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Shri Krishna, or Lord Krishna, to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali can get light from this Purana. So this is another wonderful verse glorifying Srimad Bhagavatam. And purport, Prabhupada says, Lord Shri Krishna has his eternal Dhamma, or abode, where he eternally enjoys himself with his eternal associates and paraphernalia. And his eternal abode is a manifestation of his internal energy, whereas the material world is a manifestation of his external energy. When he descends on the material world, he displays himself with all paraphernalia in his internal potency, which is called Atma Maya. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he descends by his own potency, Atma Maya. So that's 4th chapter, 6th verse. Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanam ishvaropi sam pakritim swam madistaya sambhavami Atma Maya. That's where it appears, by his own transcendental potency, internal potency. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he descends by his own potency, Atma Maya. His form, name, fame, paraphernalia, abode, etc. are not, therefore, creations of matter. He descends to reclaim the fallen souls and to reestablish codes of religion which are directly enacted by him. Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. This is religion what is religion is stated by Krishna himself. He states what the laws and principles of religion are. Nobody else can make them up. Like this one idiot that told me, oh no, I want to find out myself. I don't want to accept any guru. No, that's complete nonsense. There are too many people like that today. They want to just manufacture their own opinions and call that some type of new religious reality. I was speaking to a member of a Protestant church here in Sammamish yesterday at the farmers market, and he was telling me, "Oh, I met you some years ago, and my son and I came to your temple, and he had to do some. He was in an interfaith class at school, and he had to write something about your temple, and." Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you, and I really enjoyed coming to your temple. I said, well, if you enjoyed it so much, why don't you come back again? I haven't seen you for. He said, no. He said, I belong to another religion. I go to the Presbyterian church down the street. He said, and then he said, yeah, but I noticed, you people, it looks like there's people in your church every day. And then you give all these, every once in a while you give these big festivals. So you have like a vibrant community. I said, well, we're very fortunate. Yes, that's a fact. Our community is growing all the time, and we have a lot of programs. He said, yeah, well, that's not the case of Christianity in the United States now. Even our church has really slowed down a lot. Not so many people are coming anymore. And it's a general trend all over the United States. I said, well, I wanted to be a little smart, a little bit sarcastic, but I held myself back. I didn't say anything. I said, well, It's all because of this educational system. He said, what? I said, yeah, you're sending your kids, or these young kids are going to schools, and because of atheistic humanism, which is the basis of the pedantic or the teaching of in schools in the West and the East, the children are growing up to be atheists. He said, well, I mean, I don't know if I really agree with that. I said, then what's your explanation for the fact that atheism is the biggest minority in the United States now, more than Christians, right? There's several minorities, you have Catholics and you have Protestants, and you have the atheists. Atheists, I think they're like 24% of the population. So if you count Protestants separate and Catholics separate, then the atheists are the biggest minority. Really, it's not a religious minority, but they reject religion, right? So before they used to be like 5%, 8%, 10%. Now they're 24%. That's more than the Catholics and more than the Protestants. So they're the biggest so-called religious minority. And I said, it's because of the educational system. He said, well, my son's going to Lutheran University. I said, all the major universities, Harvard, Yale, and Columbia and other major universities, they were all started by religious organizations. And they've all metamorphosed into bastions of atheism. He said, well, but I don't know. He said, I don't really know if I agree with you or not. But anyway, it's been nice talking to you, and he walked away. So he's lamenting the fact that church, participation is going down seriously in the United States, and his church also. And then I offer him an explanation of it. He doesn't want to agree with it. Okay, that's fine. He doesn't have to agree. But then what's his explanation? Nothing. He has nothing. On the other hand, he sees that the temple here is thriving. So, we must be doing something that they're not doing. But I didn't want to get into it too much with him because, I don't want him never to talk to me again. But he took a quick exit. I have to say that. Okay. So here we see that this Bhagavatam is the essence of all transcendental knowledge. It is the cream of all spiritual scriptures. And Prabhupada says that real religion means to know God, our relation with Him, and our duties in relation with Him, and to know ultimately our destination after leaving this material body. The conditioned souls who are entrapped by the material energy hardly know all these principles of life. So, this is something you should memorize. Real religion means to know God, our relation with Him, our duties in relation with Him, and to know ultimately our destination after leaving this material body. So basically, there are 5 subjects of Bhagavad Gita. There's Krishna, living entities, time, material energy, our duty in life. And now here, there's another point in that the destination, the ultimate destination after leaving this material body, what's going to happen to us after death. These are the main questions of real religion. The conditioned souls who are entrapped by the material energy hardly know all these principles of life. Most of them are like animals engaged in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. They are mostly engaged in sense enjoyment under the pretension of religiosity, knowledge, or salvation. They say this, Prabhupada is being very, I would say, ironic here. He says, they are mostly engaged in sense enjoyment under the pretension of religiosity, knowledge, or salvation. They are still more blind in the present age of quarrel or Kali Yuga. In the Kali Yuga, the population is just a royal edition of the animals. In the Kali Yuga, the population is just a royal edition of the animals. They have nothing to do with spiritual knowledge or godly religious life. They are so blind that they cannot see anything beyond the jurisdiction of the subtle mind, intelligence, or ego. But they are very much proud of their advancement of knowledge, science, and material prosperity. They can risk their lives to become a dog or hog just after leaving the present body, for they have completely lost sight of the ultimate aim of life. The personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, appeared before us just a little prior to the beginning of Kali Yuga, and he returned to his eternal home practically at the commencement of Kali Yuga. While he was present, he exhibited everything by his different activities. He spoke the Bhagavad Gita specifically and eradicated all pretentious principles of religiosity. And prior to his departure from the material world, he empowered Shri Vyasadeva through Narada to compile the messages of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and thus both the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam are like torchbearers for the blind people of this age. In other words, if men in this age of Kali want to see the real light of life, they must take to these two books only, and their aim of life will be fulfilled. Bhagavad Gita is the preliminary study of the Bhagavatam, and Srimad Bhagavatam is the summum bonum, meaning the greatest of the great, or the best of the best of life. Lord Sri Krishna personified. So that's the summum bonum of life. It's the fact that this Bhagavatam is Lord Sri Krishna personified, not different. We must therefore accept Srimad Bhagavatam as the direct representation of Lord Krishna. One who can see Srimad Bhagavatam can also see Lord Krishna in person. They are identical. Can't say any more than that. So like Prabhupada is completely sold out to the Srimad Bhagavatam. No wonder he translated the whole, most of it, for the benefit of the devotees, so that we could be constantly in contact with Krishna. Okay. So then, text 44. O learned Brahmanas, when Sukadeva Goswami recited Bhagavatam there, in the presence of Emperor Parikshit, I heard him with rapt attention, and thus by his mercy, I learned the Bhagavatam from that great and powerful sage. Now I shall try to make you hear the very same thing as I learned it from him and as I have realized it. So this is Sutta Goswami speaking. And he's going to repeat the Bhagavatam after hearing it from Sukadeva Goswami. And purport. One can certainly see directly the presence of Lord Sri Krishna in the pages of Bhagavatam if one has heard it from a self-realized great soul like Sukadeva Goswami. One cannot, however, learn Bhagavatam from a bogus, hired reciter whose aim of life is to earn some money out of such recitation and employ the earning in sex indulgence. No one can learn Srimad Bhagavatam who is associated with persons engaged in sex life. That is the secret of learning Bhagavatam. Nor can one learn Bhagavatam from one who interprets the text by his mundane scholarship. So here Prabhupada is raising the bar really high. You should only hear it from someone who's not engaged in any sex. And he says, this is the secret. That is the secret of learning Bhagavatam. Nor can one learn Bhagavatam from one who interprets the text by his mundane scholarship. One has to learn Bhagavatam from the representative of Sukadeva Goswami and no one else, if one at all wants to see Lord Sri Krishna in the pages. That is the process, and there is no alternative Sukadeva Goswami is a bona fide representative of Sukadeva Goswami because he wants to present the message which he received from the great learned Brahmana. Sukadeva Goswami presented Bhagavatam as he heard it from his great father, and so also Suta Goswami is presenting Bhagavatam as he had heard it from Sukadeva Goswami. Simple hearing is not all. One must realize the text with proper attention. The word nivista means that Suta Goswami drank the juice of Bhagavatam through his ears. Well, that's real listening. He drank the juice of Srimad Bhagavatam through his ears. That is the real process of receiving Bhagavatam. One should hear with rapt attention from the real person, and then he can at once realize the presence of Lord Krishna in every page. The secret of knowing Bhagavatam is mentioned here. No one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. No one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. No one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. But somehow or other, if someone hears with rapt attention from the right person, at the very beginning one can assuredly see Lord Sri Krishna in person in the pages of Bhagavatam. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the first canto, third chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Krishna is the source of all incarnations. Srimad Bhagavatam, Grantaraja Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi Haribol. So, this is very, very interesting. And in the sixth chapter, the story about Narada Muni and Vyasadeva, there's something very interesting. I want to read it. Okay. And first canto, sixth chapter, verse 33. And the purport, Prabhupada says, it is a natural psychology in every individual case that a person likes to hear and enjoy his personal glories enumerated by others. That is a natural instinct. And the Lord, being also an individual personality like others, is not an exception to this psychology, because psychological characteristics visible in the individual souls are but reflections of the same psychology in the Absolute Lord. The only difference is that the Lord is the greatest personality of all and absolute in all his affairs. If, therefore, the Lord is attracted by the pure devotees' chanting of his glories, there is nothing astonishing. Since he is absolute, he can appear himself in the picture of his glorification. That's what I wanted you to hear. In the picture of his glorification. The two things being identical, meaning the Lord and his glorification are identical. See? Srila Narada chants the glorification of the Lord not for his personal benefit, but because the glorifications are identical with the Lord. Narada Muni penetrates into the presence of the Lord by the transcendental chanting. So if we want to feel the presence of God, if we want to actually experience the presence of God, then we should regularly repeat the transcendental prayers in the Bhagavatam itself. So, the wives of Kaliya serpent prayed to Krishna. Right? The gopis prayed to Krishna. Radharani prays to Krishna. Lord Shiva prays to Krishna. Dhruva Maharaj prays to Krishna. Prahlad Maharaj prays to Krishna. These are all fabulous, amazing prayers. We should be constantly reciting these, reading them and out loud. Because then not only Krishna is pleased, but the Lord can appear himself in the picture of his glorification. That's the whole point. The picture of his glory. So that is a metaphor. Now, what does that mean? The picture of his glorification. Well, you're hearing pure devotees like Prahlad Maharaj glorify the Lord, right? So he's verbally painting a picture of the Lord that you can see, and it'll appear to you. Okay. And on top of all that, it's poetic, the verses. So you're relishing the poetry, like, for example, here it says, Pagayata svaviryani tirtapada priya shavaha ahuta iva me sigraham darshanam yati chetasi. So this poetry, it says, the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, whose glories and activities are pleasing to hear, at once appears on the seat of my heart, as if called for, as soon as I begin to chant his holy activities. So, at once appears on the seat of my heart. Well, he's there, right, as Paramatma. And the heart is compared to a chair or a seat. So one time Prabhupada was asked, what happens when there's a heart transplant? Do you mean that the soul of a person is transplanted into another person's body? And Prabhupada said, no. He said, that heart transplant person has already left the body, but the seat is simply transferred to another person. Their heart's taken out, and that seat is taken out, and then a new seat comes. But the same soul in the body that's receiving the heart transplant just gets a new seat. So some people were thinking, well, the soul of the person whose heart is being taken and transplanted into another person, well, his soul goes along. But Prabhupada said, no, that person already died and left. But the other person is receiving a new seat. So here it says that the glories of the Lord and activities are pleasing to hear. At once the Lord appears on the seat of my heart as if called for, as soon as I begin to chant his holy activities. So if we want to see Krishna, then the way to do it is to repeat the prayers of these great devotees. They're all in Srimad Bhagavatam. And of course there's Brahma Samhita also, which is, but the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj and the prayers of Dhruva Maharaj and the prayers of the Prachetas and so forth, there's so many of these prayers. They are worthy of being recited regularly. And you will see the Lord. Haribol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. So, several people did their homework. So let's, so Braja Kripa, you can share your homework. Who else did their homework? Yes, okay. So we'll share the homework. Go ahead. And actually, I should have printed it out so for everyone can see it. But you can maybe email it to anybody who wants. You can share the homework. Yours was especially good. So go ahead. Okay, we have a microphone. Is there a microphone? Okay, you can come here and take it. It's not connected, he
said. The question is, explain the difference between a person who experiences self-realization to one in material illusion. So we went through references.
Explain the difference between a self-realized person
So I've given a list of differences based on the purports. So the first one is, a person who experiences self-realization becomes indifferent to the needs of the gross body and subtle body. A person who is engrossed, a person who experiences illusion, he is engrossed with satisfying the needs of gross body and subtle body. The second difference is,
So, does that mean that a person who ignores the needs will starve to death?
no, he's indifferent to it, meaning that's not his primary botheration.
Well, he minimizes.
He minimizes. Yeah,
He doesn't ignore them completely, otherwise he would die, right?
that's what I meant. Second is, the first person experiencing self-realization, he becomes serious about activities of the real self. And the person who is experiencing illusion, due to the ignorance of the real position of the self, he doesn't endeavor to perform activities related to the self. Third is,
What are the needs of the self?
the real need of the self is to serve the Lord with love. Yeah. Third difference, by proper culture and training under the guidance of a bona fide guru, the real activities of the self begin. Such a man who is engaged in activities of the self is called Jivan Mukta, or liberated, a person liberated even in conditional existence. And a person who is experiencing illusion, due to the ignorance, self-interest is calculated in terms of the gross and subtle bodies, benefit of gross and subtle bodies, that's what I meant. And therefore all his activities are spoiled life after life, because everything is temporary. Fourth, the pure devotees have nothing to derive as personal profit from their unalloyed service to the Lord. And on the other side, a person in illusion always acts for personal profit, and their so-called devotion is always mixed. Fifth, material modes. Yeah. Fifth, they render, the pure devotee side, they render incessant service to the Lord spontaneously without any reservation. And on the other side, a person in illusion never acts to really please the Lord. Everything they do is for themselves. It's always a business deal with the Lord. Sixth, everyone within the creation of the Lord is rendering service to the Lord indirectly or directly. A pure devotee renders it directly, and thus those who are rendering service unto him directly under the direction of his beloved agent are rendering service unto him favorably. So whatever they do, the pure devotees do it favorable to the service of the Lord. A person in illusion renders his service to the Lord indirectly, forced by the illusory agent of the Lord, and are rendering service unto him unfavorably. Seventh, the favorable servitors.
Whatever service he does, he wants a result.
Yeah. So basically it is not in the mood of service. Yeah. Seventh, the favorable servitors are devotees of the Lord. By the grace of the Lord, they can enter into mysterious region of transcendence by the mercy of the Lord. This is the result of the service of the pure devotees. And the so-called people in illusion and mental speculators remain in the darkness for all the time. On the other side. Eighth, when a living being is thus graced by the Lord, he is placed in his proper constitutional position to enjoy eternal spiritual life, whether in this world or in the spiritual world. And on the other side, driven by the desire to fulfill the selfish desires and goals, the persons in illusion continue their existence in the material worlds. Ninth, showing the chud. Ninth, Lord is the absolute transcendence, and so all his energies act according to his omnipotency, the same energy that acts as his external, internal, marginal energies. Therefore, by his grace, the external energy which is employed in illusioning those living beings who want to have it subsides by the will of the Lord in terms of repentance and the penance for the conditioned soul. So, um, subside means reduce. SUBSIDES, subsides. Subdues, that's what I meant. Subside is proper word, yeah. Yes. I don't know. Reduce. Yes.
Go down to a lower or normal level.
Yeah. Subside, yes. Yeah. A person in illusion is always under the control of Lord's external energy and under his supervision and under her supervision, he will be illusioned to enjoy and suffer based on his activities. Basically, the same energy acts to favor the devotee versus doesn't favor the non-devotee. 10th, and the very same energy that acts to help the purified living entity make progress on the path of self-realization. On the other side, the external energy keeps the person in illusion and sends him lower and lower to the lower and lower forms of life based on his material activities. And the final one, 11th point. This is expanding the example that is given in one of the purport. Just as an expert electrician can convert electricity to different forms of utility, the Lord converts his energy to always favor and shelter a devotee in all circumstances. Thus the external energy which bewilders the living being into continuation of birth and death is turned into internal potency by the will of the Lord to lead the living being to eternal life. That's how energy works to help the pure devotee. On the other side, external energy always bewilders a person in illusion into continuation of birth and death.
So the homework is explain the difference between someone who is self-realized and someone who is in the material illusion, referring to Srimad Bhagavatam 1.3.33, 34, 37, 38, and Bhagavad Gita 14.26 and 4.40. So begin with the list. So one who is in self-realized knows that the gross and subtle bodies are temporary or illusory impositions of the material energy on the self. Whereas the material people in the material illusion, they completely lack the awareness of the real self due to the ignorance and think that the body and the mind are the actual self. As a result, the people who are in the self-realized, their self-interest, basically the definition of their real benefit of the self, is based on the real understanding of the soul. So even in this life, their activities make them a liberated person or Jivan Mukta in the self-realized. Whereas in the case of material illusion, because their self-interest is calculated in terms of the gross and subtle bodies, all their activities essentially are spoiled life after life. So their efforts don't yield any results. The person who's self-realized, yes. The person who's self-realized prays to the Lord because of his understanding of his position for the deliverance from the clutches of the Maya, and then Lord reciprocates by removing the illusory curtain to help the self-realized to see the real knowledge and from within his heart. On the other hand, the same Lord who is in the heart of every living entity, for the materially illusioned people, because they want to enjoy the material nature, so the Lord creates the mystery of forgetfulness so that they continue to be in the illusion state. Correct. Correct. One who is self-realized, he is completely controlled by the Lord's internal energy. And for such people, external energy, which is the illusory energy, is transformed into the internal energy by the grace of the Lord. Whereas for the one who is in the materially illusioned state, they're completely controlled by the Lord's external energy, and it is in fact impossible for them to overcome this energy, illusory energy, without the mercy of the Lord, and which they've never realized to start with. The self-realized accept that the transcendence in the Lord is beyond the mind and speech. So they rely and accept bona fide scriptures and spiritual gurus, the bona fide spiritual guru, to learn about the Supreme Lord. Whereas the material people, material illusioned people, do not understand that the Lord is beyond the expression of the mind and speech, so their efforts, because of their poor fund of knowledge, they can never comprehend the existence of Lord to start with. Correct. Right. And for self-realized people and pure devotees, Supreme Lord is a real person in the form of Satchidananda Vigraha. So there is a form, name, and activity with the Supreme Lord. Whereas for those in the material illusion, for them Supreme Spirit is at best formless, nameless, and inactive. For someone who is self-realized, surrenders completely to the Lord for His mercy, whereas someone who is in the material illusion state, they have no access to the Lord, who's above their illusory mind and speech. As a result, the self-realized souls render unreserved, favorable service in a continuous fashion, expecting no personal benefit from this service. And when the Lord's grace comes, then they can enter into the transcendence. Whereas the material illusion people, they can never imagine entering into the transcendence, and in fact they remain in the darkness all the time, since they cannot even get the mercy of the Lord. Pure devotees eventually, with their activities, develop spontaneous affection towards the Lord by the actual guidance as well as the mercy of the Lord Himself. Whereas the materially illusioned people, with their fruitive activities and mental speculation, they don't even have the qualifications to enter into the transcendence. Pure devotees are never disturbed by the modes of the material energy, and in fact all their energy is transferred into the activities of Krishna consciousness. Whereas the material illusioned people, because they are ignorant and doubt the revealed scriptures, their activities eventually lead them to further fall down, and they will never see the happiness neither in this life nor in the next lives. Self-realized souls follow the footsteps of great acharyas in the disciplic succession to attain the success, whereas the mental speculators try to concoct their own theories, and they never accept a parampara as an authentic source. And then the last one is that the process of self-realization itself is made only possible by the spiritually aligned life. Obviously, in the material illusion people, they do not have the awareness of the spiritual qualifications and spiritual life. And then because of their own mental speculation, they don't have proper guidance to reach the final destination. Yes. Yes. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Homework for next week is read the parts of the 12th canto that glorify the Srimad Bhagavatam. And write, well, not write, but you can make notes, make 10 notes that you think differentiates the Srimad Bhagavatam from all other scriptures. Srimad Bhagavatam, yeah. The end of the 12th canto is glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then write 10 points that differentiate Srimad Bhagavatam from all other literatures. And also look up Dasa Mula, Dasamula, the 10 subjects of the Srimad Bhagavatam. All right, so 3 points. 1, read the glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam at the end of the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. 2, write 10 points that you think differentiate Bhagavatam from all other scriptures. And 3, look up the Dasa Mula, the 10 subjects of the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's a whole book written by Bhakti Vinod on this subject. Dasma. Haribol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.